Hello and welcome to the G5 Family channel. This video is going to be a little bit different than our normal videos in that I'm going to be doing a tutorial or a how-to step-by-step type of thing for the 13A permanent resident visa. As an American, a foreigner living in the Philippines, we have to deal with the Bureau of Immigration and our visa processes. I'm going to go back. We originally arrived here in 2017 to live. Now, we didn't necessarily plan on spending almost 4 years without returning home for a visit, but with the pandemic hitting us last year, it more or less diverted our plans for that. But all to say, we've been here now over 3 years. Well, anyone that knows the tourist visa, let me just say it this way. If you come in as a single, you're going to get a 29-day tourist visa that can be extended. It can be extended on a monthly, a bi-monthly, or even a 6-month, up to 3 years. At the 3-year point, or prior to the 3-year point, you will need to exit the country and return and get a new stamp and start all over. The process for extending your tourist visa is not a big deal. It's not difficult. It's a bit of a hassle, especially if the closest Bureau of Immigration office is 2.5-hour drive away, as in our case. But if you live in a city where you have a local office, then that's all the better, all the easier. So there's that solution. In my case, being married to a Filipino national, being married to a Filipina, she and I traveled into the country with our 2 children, and we received a 1-year Balikbayan stamp. Now, you might wonder why I said we. Well, I said we because my wife, I took her to the U.S. back in 2012. Of course, we got married, and in the 5 years between then and us moving to the Philippines, she actually accomplished her U.S. citizenship. So when she did that, she relinquished her Philippine citizenship and became a U.S. citizen. Well, when she arrived here on her U.S. passport, she received the 1-year stamp, as did our 2 girls. Okay, so immediately thereafter, she took the necessary documentation, went down and to the agency and filed the papers and received her Filipino citizenship back. Her and the 2 children are dual citizen, U.S. citizen and Filipino citizen. Okay, so upon completion of that, and then of course we got their Philippines passports, we went back to the Bureau of Immigration, and my wife and the 2 children were immediately cleared of any need for temporary visa. They are now Filipino nationals and can live here freely. However, for myself, I was still living on that 1-year Balikbayan that expired and had to be extended. Okay, so you get the idea. I don't really need to go much further than to say you can extend for 3 years without leaving, but then before that 3 years you have to leave and come back. Or in my case, being married, I chose the route to go ahead and secure my 13A permanent resident visa. Okay, so that's the premise of this video, and I will launch in. In this next section, I'm going to talk about the first round of papers that were involved in getting the way this works. The 13A is sort of a 2-part. The first part is you get the 13A secured. You become you get the 13A permanent resident visa. However, it's probationary for the first year. So I got mine in June of 2020. We're in May of 2021, so mine will expire next month. And I'm already in the process, and I'll show you in a minute, for extending or renewing that from, it's called an amendment from probationary to permanent. And so I'm in the process of doing that. Once it becomes permanent, under the current structure, it is permanent. It does not expire. You have to make annual check-ins at the tune of about 300 pesos, which is about $6 US. But other than that, the visa itself does not expire. The only other piece that does expire is your ACR card, but under the permanent resident visa, it's a 5-year card as opposed to a 1-year card. Currently, I have the 1-year probationary card, but when I renew and become a permanent resident, then my ACR card will become a 5-year card. And so I'll have to renew that every 5 years. Okay, so getting back into, you'll notice there's 2 panels on your screen. The left-hand side is, I've already gone ahead and downloaded the general instructions as well as the checklist for the first round, the first phase, the conversion to non-quota immigrant visa by marriage probationary. Okay. On the right panel, you'll see that I'm in the website, but what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to back out. I'm going to go to google.com, and I'm just going to show you how easy it is to find these resources online. Type Philippines 13A, and you'll see the very top search result, conversion to non-quota immigrant visa by marriage. You click on that, and voila, there are all of your resources. Now, if you scroll down here to what to bring, you have the checklist with complete documentary requirements, application form, and then the number 3 is an additional information, and I'll show you what that is here in a second. So again, back to the left panel, you'll see the general instructions, and guys, this is really straightforward. Now, one thing I'll mention, again, we live in the Philippines, and so you have to be aware and you have to realize that you're going to run into challenges, hassles, inconveniences along the way. Depending on your province, depending on your location, you may run into different nuances of the requirements. And I'll share one piece that happened to me personally last year when I went to the immigration office. Another thing, while I'm speaking to those challenges and hassles, again, as I said earlier, depending on where you live, you may not have a local Bureau of Immigration office. In my case, I have to travel 2.5 hours to the nearest office, but yet that office does not do 13A. They do visa extensions, but they do not do process 13A. So I actually have to cross over to the next province over in Iloilo City to process my 13A. And right now, during the pandemic, that opens up a whole new can of worms with travel requirements. And going back to our general instructions here, and again, I'm going to try to go through these fairly quickly. I want to do a shout out to another YouTube channel called The Pirate Cove, and I'll leave his link in the description. He's put out a series of videos. There was I believe it was 5 episodes. And just by the way, if you're watching this video, those were tremendously helpful. Getting back to, if you follow the directions, you are 99 to 100% there. So just take your time. I read the instructions. I'll read number 1, 2 or 3 times just to make sure that I have fully comprehended and processed the information accurately, and then I apply it to the checklist, so on and so forth. All right. So I'm going to jump down to the actual checklist, and I'm going to walk through these. I'll trust you to be able to follow the directions yourself. Okay. So number 1, joint letter request addressed to the commissioner from the applicant and the petitioning Filipino spouse. Okay, let me just break that down for you. Number 1, the commissioner of the Bureau of Immigration. Okay. The applicant, that would be the foreigner. The petitioner, that would be the Filipino national, your spouse. Okay. The joint letter is really just comprised of a personal letter, with some formality, but a personal letter saying, we request to be considered for, the 13A visa, blah, blah, blah. We've, secured and provided all of the required documents. Okay. So it's pretty straightforward. It does not require a public notary or anything like that. All right. Number 2, this was where we got caught up. Duly accomplished CGAF, the BI, the Bureau of Immigration form, which is the application. Okay, and I'm going to click over to that right here, and that's what that looks like. Standard application, form fun. Okay. Now, one thing I'll mention, I use Adobe Acrobat to actually type in to this. It's a PDF. But if you don't have that, that's okay. Just handwrite it, print it out, and handwrite it. But I do suggest really take the time to write it out in capital, in block letters. Make it very clear. Be sure you read the field. Make sure you already know the answer properly before you write it. You don't want any cross outs. You don't want any scribbles and scratches. And then also you don't want to leave any fields blank. Now, of course, when I'm not talking about these multiple choice. In this case, you are doing a consolidated general application. This would be a conversion. You're converting from tourist to a permanent resident by marriage. Okay. So you're only going to check one of these items, but I'm just talking about for each field, be sure you put an answer. If you don't have an answer, in my case, I don't know what this BI accreditation number is, so I left that blank. But in other cases, if it does not apply, so for instance here, applicant's personal information, I don't have any other names or aliases, so I put N/A. Don't leave a field open, okay? And again, write in very clear block letters, print, not cursive. Make it, here's the thing, it's only to your benefit to make it as clean and pristine as possible so that those agencies, they can look at the form, they can take the information they need and process your papers and get it done. So make it as easy for them as possible, and it will make it easy for you as well. Okay? All right, let's go back to the directions or the checklist. Let me continue for number 2. So with the application, I strongly recommend, and I'm picking up my folders here, when I arrive to the immigration office with my dually, that's 2, right? It doesn't say 4. There's nothing in here that says you need 4 copies, 4 folders. Nowhere in any of the requirements does it say that. But when we got into the office and I proudly presented my documentation, she said, sir, you need 4 copies. So guess what? 1, 2, 3, 4. So you can see 4. I don't know if you can see that or not. 4 copies. Okay. So they want you to have a legal folder. So I'm trying to hold this up to the camera. They want you to have a legal folder. And then, now I haven't done it yet, but in here you put the double clip at the top and you bind your forms all to that clip. Now we're going to the notary tomorrow to get these notarized, so I haven't clipped them down to make it easier to manage. Okay, so buy your 4 folders, buy you the 4 clips, and prepare to do your documents. They just like it that way. In fact, when we left with our client copy, I have it right here. This is what we left with. Client copy, and looky here. There's the clip. Can you see that? All right. Okay, straightforward stuff here, but it's all important. It's the little things. It's always the little things, right? Okay. So, number 3, marriage certificate or marriage contract. Now, again, this has nuances in terms of were you married in the U.S., were you married in the Philippines, blah, 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 blah. Now, in our case, I'll just explain it this way. We were married in the U.S., but when we received our U.S. marriage certificate, we sent it to the Philippines embassy in the U.S., and we acquired our Philippines certified marriage certificate. So we have both. We have our U.S. marriage certificate and our Philippines certified, or our Philippines marriage certificate, right? So what did I do? I provided both. Now, I think they only needed the Philippines, but I provided both, okay? Number 4, birth certificate or certified true copy. Now, Can be confusing if you're looking at this yourself. I want to clarify. You are being petitioned by a Philippines national, your spouse. So the reason why they ask for the birth certificate, they want to verify that the Filipino national is truly a Philippine national, and by providing hers or his, whichever the case may be, Philippines birth certificate that proves that they are Philippine national. Now, don't get that confused, because it does not say. It only says as Filipino citizen of the Filipino spouse. So again, the wording here is a bit confusing. So what this is asking for is the Filipino petitioner's birth certificate, okay? Not the foreigner. So in my case, my passport is essentially all that they needed to see for, to establish and verify my American citizenship, okay? So the birth certificate is the Filipino spouse. Number 5, the photocopy of passport, bio page, and latest admission. So I'll just break this down again. This is a photocopy of your passport. Now, you will need to take your passport with you because they will stamp it. All right. So be sure you do take your passport, but they will not keep it. Not in this case, at least. So eventually you will return after your 13A is approved. You'll return to the Bureau of Immigration office, and then they will give you your 13A stamp in your visa, in your passport. Okay. But for now, you need a photocopy of the bio page. That's the page with your picture. And then the latest admission with valid authorized stay. So that's basically the visa stamp, the sticker. In some cases, in my case, I had a paper receipt that was stapled in my passport because they were out of stock on the stickers. Okay, so you just need to prove your that you are still, current with your temporary or tourist visa. All right, so you'll need a photocopy of your passport bio page and a copy of your current visa sticker or stamp or receipt, whichever it'll be in your passport, provided by BI, by Bureau of Immigration. All right. And then number 6, a valid National Bureau of Investigation NBI clearance. If your application is filed 6 months or more from the date of your arrival in the Philippines. So if you've been here for longer than 6 months, they want to check your criminal background. Now, I want to make a couple of comments with regard to NBI. When I first saw this, of course, it's one of the requirements, so I'm, going to do it, obviously. But I'm kind of like, well, what is this all about? Since then, which is going back a couple of years ago now, since then, I've learned a lot and come to realize that, by the way, it's just another, government agency. They just want to keep track of their foreigners. They want to keep, it's not a requirement to live in the Philippines, but, to apply for some of these things, it is a requirement. My philosophy now is it's a 1-year certificate. I'm just going to renew it. I'm just going to do it because if I need it for something, I have it, and it's not intrusive. Now, they do take your fingerprints and things like that, but so what? It's okay. So I just suggest keeping an NBI. Now, I may get comments and say, oh my gosh, never, don't want to do that. That's fine. That's your prerogative. But for me, it just makes sense. And so in order to get, I'm not going to do a long, extensive talk on how to get your NBI, but you will need a barangay clearance, which again, that's a local thing. You go to your local barangay office. It's very quick, very easy, and very inexpensive. I mean, it's less than $1. I mean, it's real cheap. So get that, and then you go over with your normal identification, your passport, your ACR card, whatever, and fill out the application, and there's a whole, just go to the website, and I don't have it pulled up, but I'll put a link in the description. But that is one of the listed requirements to get your NBI clearance. And again, it's not a big deal. It's the clearance itself lasts a year, but it is required for this visa. Okay, moving right along. So number 7, the BI clearance certificate. I found this to be, I didn't know what it was, and so I didn't do it, and it turned out they do it in the BI office. So this is not of concern. Number 8, the original or certified true copy of Bureau of Quarantine medical clearance. If you are coming from a country, and in my case, America's not on this list. If your country is not listed on this Annex A, then you are not required to provide the Bureau of Quarantine medical clearance. Okay? Plain and simple. So America is not one of the countries listed. If you want to look at this Annex A, you can just Google this number SBM-14-059-A, and it'll pop right up. You can look at it and see if your country is listed. All right? So that's it. Now, the next section, I will touch on it. This is strictly for those who are bringing in non-Filipino children. So, scenario, you're divorced, you have custody of your children from your American or otherwise spouse, and you are bringing them to the Philippines with you, then yes, these are required, and the requirements are very similar to your own. The application, the passport, the proof of affiliation with the petitioner, which I believe in this case would be if your spouse is petitioning for them, then just a proof that you are married to their father, I suppose. Again, I didn't have to do this, so I'm not 100% familiar with the process. And then, of course, the NBI clearance, the BI clearance and the Bureau of Quarantine medical clearance are not required if you're coming from the U.S. All right, so that's the checklist. So essentially, for me, I had to focus on items 1 through 6 as part of my requirements, and then I traveled to the Bureau of Immigration office in Iloilo City. I went in, presented my 2 folders, and found out that I had to have 4. So we did a scramble. Thankfully, there was a photocopy office real close by, and so we were able to get the additional copies real quick and easy. And they were extremely facilitating. They're very busy. They're a bit strict, but it's not a bad experience. It's a good experience. Be sure that you keep a cool head about yourself. Just put on your patient's suit before you go, because you will need it, and just roll with it, go with the flow, because you're not going to fight the system. You can yell, you can pitch a fit, you can scream if things don't go your way. That is not going to change anything. And if you can just understand that the Filipino workers, they're not in a position to veer away from policy or procedure. They are strictly required to follow policy and procedure, and all of the kicking and screaming that we might do is not going to deviate them from that. They are not going to lose their job for you. I can tell you that right now. They're not going to lose their job for me either. But thankfully, the experience every time I've gone over has been phenomenal. To sort of wrap up, that is more or less the going through the requirements and sort of clarifying details within the checklist. That you will submit your papers. They will contact you back to schedule a interview. And by the way, your spouse needs to go with you. Your spouse is petitioning you, so it's important that he or she accompanies you on these visits, because she or he is the one petitioning you, so they have to be there. They have to be present. So the second visit, you'll go back for the interview, and I'm not sure what else is involved in that visit. I can't remember. It's been a year and a half ago. And then the third and final visit will be to go back and get your passport with your stamp and your ACR card. Now, I'll share this because it's relevant in these times with the pandemic. I went to the Iloilo City office in February of this year. My visa was approved last June, but because of the pandemic and because of travel restrictions, I was not able to go. When I arrived there, and when I talk about having your patience, oh my goodness, when I arrived there, the office was closed. So you can imagine, you know what a shock this was. Now, thankfully, the head of the agency, her and one of the primary guards were there. Now, they were in street clothes. They weren't there for work because the office was closed. But all to say, we were able to work it out to where I didn't have to return. And a few weeks later, all of my passport, my ACR card, everything arrived at the front door here. So all's well that ends well, right? The last thing is, once you receive that remember, it's for 1 year. If you cross over, Christmas and New Year's, generally in January, February, you'll need to return for your annual check-in, even though it's only been a few months. So you'll do your check-in, and then a few months later, and like in my case in June, I'm in the process of renewing the probationary. Once I complete the probationary process and I receive my permanent resident visa, then I will do a follow-up video to this one that explains that whole process. I can already tell you that the checklist, while similar, is much less. There's only 3 or 4 of the requirements, most of which you will already have because you've been through the first process. And it's my understanding that I will only need to make one trip there, and that I can set up to have my documents, my passport, and those kinds of things expressed to me here at home. Now, if that's not the case, if I have to go back, then so be it. But as I said, once I complete this next phase, I will do a video of that experience and share what I learned along the way, and hopefully be of help to you. Okay, with that, I'm going to wrap up, and I thank you for watching this video. I hope you have a great day, and leave your questions in the comments section. If you like this video, please feel free to share it with anyone that you might know that needs this kinds of support. We look forward to seeing you in the next video. God bless, and thanks a lot.